A family's vacation at a beautiful seaside resort unexpectedly turns into a nightmare when prejudiced airport security officials decide they don't belong here. The father is interrogated and detained right in front of his wife and 4 daughters, unaware that the man they targeted is a dedicated FBI agent. What happens when the truth is revealed? Subscribe to the channel to follow this powerful story of justice, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. The Johnson family had been looking forward to this vacation for a long time. Mike, a seasoned FBI agent with a tough exterior but a deep love for his family, rarely had extended time with his wife and daughters without work worries. Emma, a well-known lawyer who tirelessly fights for others' rights, also rarely gets a chance to rest. Both agreed this vacation was a rare opportunity to spend uninterrupted time with their 4 daughters. Sophie, the eldest at 14, intelligent and calm, often tries to help her parents with her siblings. Lily, 12, bold and assertive, is always the first to stand up for her family when anything unfair happens. Chloe, 10, sweet and sensitive, is easily affected by the emotions around her. Lastly, there's 8-year-old Ava, the innocent and carefree youngest, with sparkling eyes that are the family's joy. The family enters the large, bustling international airport, where people hurry by with luggage, lining up for security checks. The 4 daughters, faces bright and excited, chatter non-stop about the exciting things they plan to do on their trip. Emma smiles at them, her heart full of love and happiness. "Look, girls," she says, pointing to a small cafe with chocolate-covered donuts. "If we get through check-in quickly, I'll buy you some treats." Mike chuckles, feeling a sense of relief that, after months of work pressure, he can finally spend time with his family. "All right, let's all head to security," he says, pulling his suitcase and holding Ava's hand. He and Emma share a knowing glance, understanding that this would be a peaceful time together. But as the family approaches the security checkpoint, the joyful atmosphere begins to shift. The airport security staff, initially glancing briefly at the family, gradually adopt more suspicious, scrutinizing looks. Mike and Emma quickly realize that to these officers, they are not just an ordinary family. The family enters a designated screening area, but no one expected that this was just the beginning of a series of unfortunate events on their journey. A stern-looking officer approaches Mike and Emma, his cold gaze sweeping over them before settling on their 4 daughters. The warmth of their vacation fades amid the tense silence of the security checkpoint. Mike stands tall, maintaining his composure, attempting to show that his family has nothing to hide. He's accustomed to stressful situations at work, but this was different. In front of him were not dangerous criminals, but his innocent daughters, huddled together, eyes filled with confusion. Sophie, the oldest, holds Chloe's hand to reassure her younger sister, while Ava tugs at her mother's shirt, her eyes full of worry. Emma kneels to comfort Ava, smiling softly, though her own heart is tense. The security officer meticulously checks each of the family's documents. Mike hands over their passports, along with his FBI credentials, attempting to show maximum cooperation. "I'm an FBI agent, and my family is on vacation," Mike states, voice steady and clear, but he can sense the skepticism in the officer's gaze. The officer examines the badge closely, then looks back at Mike with barely concealed disdain. Emma starts to feel indignation but holds back to remain calm. Sensing the tension, Lily quietly asks her mother, "Mom, why is he looking at Dad like that?" Emma bends down, taking her daughter's hand, whispering, "It's all right, sweetie, just a routine check." Yet inside, Emma feels a vague sense of dread. After reviewing their passports and credentials, the officer still does not allow the family to proceed, instead calling another officer over. The two exchange a brief conversation, their expressions growing increasingly suspicious. Mike feels a deep discomfort as they continue discussing as though his family is some sort of threat. He stays calm, but frustration begins to simmer within him. The second officer approaches, this time with a cold, unfriendly tone, requesting the Johnson family to step into a separate room for further verification. At this unexpected demand, Mike firmly asks, "What more do you need to check? I've provided everything." But the officer merely shrugs, ordering, "It's standard procedure. Please cooperate." Emma clearly sees the injustice in how they're being treated, but suppresses her anger to avoid escalating the situation for her daughters. She places a reassuring hand on Mike's shoulder, signaling to stay calm and cooperate. Mike grips her hand tightly, and they share a sympathetic look, realizing that something was unfolding beyond their expectations. Their daughters, especially Chloe and Ava, begin to look anxious, confused about what's happening. Chloe nervously asks her mother, "Did we do something wrong, Mom?" Emma strokes her hair, shaking her head softly. "No, honey, it's just a check." But deep down, she understands that her family is being unfairly targeted. As the Johnsons enter the private screening room, Mike and Emma sense their daughter's growing anxiety. The officers there continue to scrutinize them, inspecting every item in their luggage. The probing and suspicious looks create a heavy atmosphere. The tension not only affects Mike and Emma, but also frightens their daughters. Sophie, trying to stay composed, looks at her mother as if asking if this would soon be over. Lily scans the room, eyes full of defiance, observing how the officers treat her family. She realizes this is not a random check, but excessive scrutiny. Although Mike keeps his composure outwardly, he feels anger rising within. He knows his family has done nothing wrong. But why are they being treated like criminals? Before the gaze of his daughters, Mike feels an increasing responsibility to protect his family from this injustice. He glances at Emma, both understanding this situation might not end as easily as they had hoped. The officers continue inspecting the Johnsons with an unsettling suspicion. A young officer in particular appears especially cold, his gaze lingering on each family member as if searching for something amiss. Mike recognizes that look. It's not one for ordinary passengers, but one of judgment and suspicion. Emma notices this too, her anger starting to build up. "We've provided all necessary documents. I don't understand why you're treating us this way," she says, trying to keep her voice calm, yet filled with discontent. The officer merely shrugs, continuing to stare coldly at the family without offering any explanation. Lily, their 12-year-old, begins to sense something truly wrong and whispers, "Mom, why are they treating us like this?" Sophie, the eldest, places a hand on her sister's shoulder, trying to reassure her, though she herself is filled with mixed emotions. Chloe and Ava stand close to Emma, clinging to her hand, their eyes darting around nervously, hoping it will all be over soon. After a while, when Mike asks again, the officer responds with a chilly tone, "We must ensure passenger safety. There have been recent incidents, so we're being more cautious." This vague and evasive answer only fuels Mike and Emma's frustration, as they know the real reason isn't caution at all. Emma glances at Mike, her expression determined. She knows this isn't the first time they've faced unfair treatment, but this time, it's right in front of their children, during the vacation they had anticipated so much. The silent message from the officers implies that their family does not belong, that they are not like other passengers. As the tension escalates, another officer arrives, rechecks the family's documents, then calls outside to verify. They start asking more personal questions, not only about Mike, but about each family member, as if they're trying to find a reason to detain them further. Mike and Emma both feel insulted, but for the sake of their children, they keep their cool to prevent the situation from escalating. Emma whispers to Mike, "Do you think they'll let us go? The kids are scared." Mike looks deeply into her eyes, trying to reassure her, though he too is filled with anger and worry. "I don't know, but we have to stay calm," he replies, trying to keep his anger in check to prevent worsening the situation. Sophie quietly asks her mother, "Did we do something wrong, Mom? Why are they keeping us so long?" Emma strokes her daughter's hair, attempting a comforting smile. "There's nothing wrong, honey. I promise we'll be out soon," she says. Though internally, she shares her daughter's worry. She has fought for many and unfair situations, but today her own family is a victim of baseless prejudice. Finally, an officer returns after checking with another department, but instead of letting them go, he points to a different door and instructs them to wait in another lounge area until they finish verification. Emma can no longer remain silent. "This is a passenger area. Why should my family be relocated to wait elsewhere?" she asks, her voice calm yet filled with indignation. The officer only shrugs, avoiding eye contact. With no other choice, Mike grips Emma's hand, signaling restraint to avoid scaring the children further. He looks at his daughters, who now carry an innocence tinged with worry. Sophie and Lily, who are beginning to understand the situation, wear looks of concern and confusion, while Chloe and Ava cling to their mother, puzzled and unsure. The Johnsons have no option but to move to the designated waiting area, feeling the chilling and unwelcoming atmosphere surrounding them. Each family member senses something isn't right. It feels as though their long-awaited family vacation is now tainted by an air of injustice. As they settle in the waiting area, two airport police officers appear, approaching with serious faces and scrutinizing eyes. The Johnson family feels the tension rising to a suffocating level. Emma feels her chest tighten, struggling to stay calm despite the discomfort. The first officer, a middle-aged man with a stern face, looks Mike up and down, then firmly requests, "I need to see your identification again. This time, we'll need the IDs of each family member." His tone lacks any semblance of politeness, instead carrying an imposing, impatient edge. Although Mike is frustrated, he maintains his composure. He's used to handling tense situations in his job, but the most upsetting part is facing it now as a husband and father. He exchanges a look with Emma, both understanding they have no other choice but to comply. He hands over his FBI badge and their passports to the officer. "My family is just on vacation, and I'm an FBI agent," Mike clarifies, attempting to keep the situation clear. But his introduction does nothing to change the officer's attitude. In fact, the officer barely glances at Mike's badge. Instead, the younger officer beside him sneers, displaying a clear lack of respect. Emma cannot remain silent any longer. "Our family has complied with every one of your requests since the beginning," she says firmly. "We haven't done anything wrong. Can you please explain why you're holding us back and inspecting us so thoroughly?" The young officer responds in a cold, unfriendly tone. "It's our protocol, ma'am, so you'll need to cooperate." He provides no specific reason, responding dismissively, without respect. Sophie and Lily, standing near their mother, notice the frustration on her face. Meanwhile, Chloe and Ava still cling to her, confused and scared. Mike feels personally affronted, yet he keeps his voice steady. "You say it's protocol, but is this protocol applied to everyone or only to us?" he asks, looking the officer directly in the eye. His question is sharp but calm, hoping to receive a reasonable answer. The young officer shrugs, unapologetic. "If you have an issue with our protocol, you're welcome to file a complaint, but I advise you to cooperate if you don't want more trouble." Emma realizes the deadlock of the situation, gripping Mike's hand, both exchanging an understanding glance. They know there's little hope for a productive conversation with these people. She turns to her daughters, trying to reassure them with a light smile. "Mom and Dad will handle this. Don't worry," she says, softly stroking each child's hair. Just then, the senior officer steps closer to Mike, his gaze sharp, requesting Mike to move to a private corner for further discussion. Mike reluctantly agrees, walking to the spot the officer indicates, filled with anger over the injustice. He looks back at Emma, attempting to convey reassurance, though he knows the emotion is hard to hide. Emma remains with the children, trying to stay calm as she watches her husband being taken aside for questioning. Sophie, eyes full of worry, quietly asks her mother, "Mom, is Dad okay?" Emma forces a smile. "Dad's fine, honey. He's just talking to the officers." Yet deep inside, she too is filled with anxiety. While Mike is being questioned, Emma feels surrounded by the stares of other security personnel and curious passengers observing the family. Though she tries to remain strong for her children, she feels a sense of helplessness and injustice. As someone who has fought for others' rights in countless cases, now her own family is caught in such an unfair situation. Across the room, Mike maintains his calm responses to the officer's absurd and unrelated questions. He knows that the more he cooperates, the sooner it will be over. But as the young officer continues to repeat questions as if trying to pressure him, Mike begins to lose his patience. He looks directly at the officer, his voice no longer calm. "I've answered all your questions. My family has done nothing wrong, and we have the right to be treated fairly like any other passenger here." The young officer shrugs with a challenging attitude. "I'm just doing my job, sir," he replies, tone dripping with sarcasm. Across the room, Emma notices the situation between Mike and the officer becoming tenser. She holds her children's hands tightly, her worried gaze fixed on her husband, her resolve growing to ensure this situation does not simply pass unnoticed. She takes a deep breath, stepping forward with a determined look in her eyes, toward the young officer, showing such blatant disrespect to Mike. "That's enough," Emma speaks, her voice clear and commanding. "Our family has complied with all of your requests. We've provided all necessary documents and answered all questions. You have no reason to continue detaining us and treating us like this." The young officer turns around to look at Emma, raising an eyebrow defiantly. "We have the right to conduct further checks if we feel necessary," he replies, voice full of arrogance. Emma moves closer, undaunted by his challenging stare. "I am a lawyer and I know my family's rights. If you have no valid reason, continuing to hold us here is a violation of our personal freedom." She keeps her voice steady, though it carries an undertone of anger. Sophie and Lily, the two older daughters, look at their mother with admiration. They have never seen her stand up with such strength, especially in a situation like this. The senior officer, who had previously questioned Mike, seems to realize the situation is becoming more heated than necessary. He raises a hand to signal the young officer to calm down. "We're just following protocol, ma'am. There's no need to escalate this," he says, trying to sound conciliatory. Emma doesn't back down. "Your protocol is not an excuse for abusing power. You've seen my husband's badge, you know he's an FBI agent, and you can verify that with the office. Keeping us here without valid reason is unacceptable." The young officer scoffs, acting as though he doesn't care. "If you have a problem, you're free to file a complaint. But for now, I need you to stay calm and let us continue the checks," he says, his tone impatient and intentionally provocative. Emma feels her blood boiling. She knows she can't let this go further, especially in front of her children. She looks the young officer directly in the eyes, her voice clear and firm. "I'm staying calm, so my children won't be afraid of the abuse of power from people like you. But I will not stay silent if you continue to treat my family this way. If necessary, I'll see this to the end and make sure every action today is held accountable." Sophie and Lily look at their mother, admiration shining in their eyes. They can sense the strength and resolve in their mother, which reassures them. Chloe and Ava huddle close, looking at their mother with trust, even though they don't fully understand, but they know she won't let anyone harm their family. Mike, standing beside her, feels both pride and concern. He knows Emma won't let their family be bullied, but he also understands the situation could quickly turn worse. He steps closer to Emma, placing a hand on her shoulder as if to reassure her and signal that he shares her anger, but needs to remain calm for their children's sake. The senior officer, noticing the growing tension and the attention of surrounding passengers, subtly signals the young officer. After a moment's hesitation, the young officer reluctantly steps back, his face still defiant and unapologetic. "All right, we'll check with our superiors," the senior officer says, his tone more conciliatory. "Please give us a few more minutes." Emma says nothing more, her gaze still unwavering. She stands beside her daughters, gently stroking Ava's hair, calming her children while keeping her eyes on the group of officers. Her four daughters, though young, sense the injustice and hold each other's hands tightly, finding comfort in each other and their parents. As the officers turn their backs to discuss, Emma looks at Mike, her gaze filled with resolve. "We're not letting this go, Mike," she says quietly but clearly. Mike nods, holding Emma's hand, both knowing they'll fight to protect their family's dignity and peace. As they stand there, the surrounding atmosphere grows more suffocating. Some bystanders begin to notice, stopping to watch, feeling the tension of the situation. A few shake their heads in disapproval, while others discreetly raise their phones to film, capturing what's happening. Emma notices this and feels some relief knowing her family isn't entirely alone. Although none of the onlookers step in, their presence and silent disapproval seem to bolster her strength. She looks at her daughters, gently brushing each child's hair, as if to assure them that everything will soon be fine. Sophie, the eldest, notices the passengers, filming and taking photos, feeling her own indignation rise. She looks at her mother with a serious gaze and whispers, "Mom, they're recording. We didn't do anything wrong." Sophie's innocent yet determined statement brings a small smile to Emma's face. She knows her children feel this injustice and won't stay silent. On the other side, the young officer seems to realize he's under scrutiny. He turns, seeing the phones filming, and looks momentarily anxious. He turns to his colleague, whispering as if trying to de-escalate the situation before it spirals out of control. but his initial smirk and arrogant attitude have disappeared. A middle-aged woman in the crowd suddenly speaks up loud enough for others nearby to hear, "This isn't right. That family did nothing wrong. Why are they holding them so long?" Her voice resonates like an undercurrent, stirring empathy among the crowd. A few others begin to whisper amongst themselves, their eyes focused on the Johnsons and the officers. Emma turns, looking at the woman with a grateful expression. She realizes the power of solidarity is immense, and that injustice is hard to hide when many are watching. Her gaze hardens, and her determination grows. Emma knows this is no longer just her family's issue, but an opportunity to stand against the unfair treatment others might also face. Meanwhile, the senior officer seems to recognize the dilemma. He turns back to the Johnsons, attempting to soften his tone. "I ask for the family's patience. We only need a few more minutes to confirm some details." However, his words fail to hide his awkwardness and tension. Emma looks at him, her tone firm but calm. "Our family has been patient from the beginning. The question is, what more do you need? We are legitimate travelers, not violators, nor do we deserve this excessive questioning." She raises her voice slightly, enough for those around to hear, as a way to emphasize that they do not deserve such treatment. The young officer now appears less challenging, but still retains his detached attitude, trying to hide his discomfort. He glares briefly at the people filming, then turns back to the Johnsons, speaking in a stilted tone. "Just following standard procedures, ma'am? No need to escalate." Emma shakes her head, no longer concealing her anger. "Standard procedures? Do you apply these procedures to everyone, or just to families who don't look like you?" Her statement lands like a blow to the young officer's smug attitude, and his face takes on an unpleasant look. The tension increases further as a few people in the crowd begin to speak out in support. "That's right, this is clearly discrimination," one person exclaims. The passengers start murmuring, many visibly displeased. Some even mention they'll post videos on social media to make the incident public. The senior officer, realizing the situation might escalate, briefly exchanges words with the younger officer, then reluctantly turns to the Johnson family, nodding stiffly. "Apologies for the inconvenience. The family is free to go. We will contact you if we need further information." Mike gives a slight cynical smile, knowing this decision was only made due to the public attention and discontent. He takes Emma's hand, both feeling a sense of relief mixed with anger at having to endure such baseless discrimination in front of their children. Emma bends down, embracing her 4 daughters. "It's over. We'll be on our way soon," she says, her voice soft but emotional. Sophie and Lily look at her, still confused but full of admiration. Chloe and Ava hold their mother tightly, seeking comfort after everything that happened. The Johnsons slowly leave the security area, though Emma and Mike's hearts are filled with determination. They know this incident will not end here. This experience serves as a reminder that injustice can happen anywhere, but it's also a call to action to ensure no other family faces similar discrimination. As they walk away, the crowd's gaze follows, phones still recording, as a testament to the quiet struggle they just endured. Mike and Emma lead their daughters away from the security area, filled with anger yet resolved not to let the matter end quietly. They were allowed to leave, but there was no apology or explanation from the security staff or police. This only fueled Emma's sense of indignation. She knew that if she let this go, other families might face the same situation. As they neared the waiting area, a senior airport official who had been informed of the incident quickly approached, looking visibly uneasy. Dressed in a sharp uniform with a name tag and badge, he tried to appear composed, though his eyes betrayed his discomfort when he noticed the crowd's sympathetic and disapproving gazes. He nodded politely, offering a mild smile before speaking. "Hello, I'm the head of airport security. I understand there were some misunderstandings during the security check," he said, his tone far softer. "We sincerely apologize if this caused any inconvenience to your family." Emma didn't let him finish, her eyes gleaming sharply. "Inconvenience? Let me be clear. This was not an inconvenience," she said, her voice resolute. "My family complied with all of your procedures. We showed our documents, my husband's badge, passports, everything, yet we were still treated like violators. Do you know what my children had to endure? You had no valid reason to keep my family there for so long." The official shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Emma's gaze. He tried to appear conciliatory, yet it was clear he was uneasy under the crowd's scrutiny and the filming passengers. He hesitated, then said, "We deeply regret this unpleasant experience. This situation could have been handled better. We'll be conducting an internal investigation to understand what went wrong and ensure it doesn't happen again." Mike stood beside Emma, his expression icy. He stared directly at the official, reminding him that no words could soothe the anger they felt. "An internal investigation, huh? My family cooperated from start to finish, did everything you asked, yet we were still treated like suspects. We don't want a vague apology." Sophie, the eldest daughter, though young, understood that something profoundly wrong had just happened to her family. She looked at her mother with admiration, then turned to the official with a serious expression. "We didn't do anything wrong, so why treat us like that?" she asked, her voice innocent but filled with resolve. The security officer leaned down, awkwardly responding, "You're right. We sometimes encounter misunderstandings. We just want to ensure the safety of all passengers." Emma smirked. "Safety for the passengers? Do you realize that your discriminatory attitude not only hurt my family, but also made it blatantly clear to those around us that you're abusing your power? I cannot accept that." The security officer began to show signs of unease, glancing around to see that other passengers were still watching and recording the situation. He knew that no apology could soothe the Johnson family or divert the crowd's attention. He turned to the young police officer who had earlier shown disrespect toward Mike and shot him a reminding look. The young officer immediately lowered his head, took a step back, but his face still carried a hint of defiance. The murmurs from the crowd grew louder, the voices becoming clearer. An older man in the crowd spoke up. "Their family did nothing wrong. We saw everything." Another woman, unable to contain her outrage, shouted, "Why are you detaining them for so long without reason? This is ridiculous." The angry voices from the crowd empowered the Johnson family, leaving the security officer feeling helpless. The security officer tried to keep his tone calm. "I assure you, we will conduct a thorough investigation of this incident and take action if there was any wrongdoing. The family may contact us for assistance if they wish to file any complaints." Emma crossed her arms, her voice firm and unwavering. "You don't need to pretend to be polite. We're not going to let this go. We will contact the authorities, and I will ensure that your actions and your team's actions today will be brought to light." Mike placed a hand on his wife's shoulder, his gaze no longer tolerant but filled with resolve. He turned to the security officer. "My family did not deserve to be treated this way, and we will do everything we can to make sure no one else has to go through something similar." Their children, especially Sophie and Lily, heard the determination in their parents' voices. Their eyes filled with admiration and pride. They had never seen their parents so resolute, and it made them stronger, understanding that this was not just a minor incident, but something worth fighting for. The security officer understood that he could no longer say anything to ease the Johnson family's anger. "We will reach out to your family if there is any additional information about the investigation," he said, bowing slightly before leaving, pulling the young officer and other security personnel away from the area. The tense atmosphere slowly dissipated, but Mike and Emma knew that this was only the beginning. As the security officer departed, Emma turned to Mike, and in their eyes was a steady determination. They held hands, exchanging a meaningful look. Both knew that it was time to stand up for justice, not just for their family, but for anyone who might go through the same experience. Before moving on, Emma knelt down to speak to her children, her voice gentle yet resolute. "We're not going to let this be forgotten. Your father and I will do everything we can to protect you and make sure no one else has to endure this kind of injustice." Her children nodded, sensing that their parents were fighting not just for their family, but for the values of fairness and humanity they deeply believed in. The Johnson family slowly left the security area, but with a renewed determination in their hearts. The surrounding passengers, who had witnessed each moment, offered them looks of admiration and support. They knew they weren't alone in this fight, and their story would not end here at the airport. This was only the beginning of a journey to reclaim justice and dignity, not only for themselves but for all those who might face similar circumstances. Emma and Mike held hands with their children as they stepped out of the security area with a strong resolve. But on each face was the mark of exhaustion and hurt. The excitement of the trip had completely faded, replaced by the worried and anxious expressions of their 4 daughters. The experience had left a deep emotional imprint on each member of the Johnson family, something they would likely never forget. Sophie, the eldest daughter, walked closely beside her mother, her eyes filled with contemplation as if trying to understand what had just happened. Finally, Sophie looked up at Emma, her voice small but determined. "Mom, why did they treat us like that? We didn't do anything wrong." Sophie's eyes held both anger and confusion, emotions she hadn't felt before. Emma stopped, crouching down to be eye level with her daughter, placing both hands on Sophie's shoulders. She knew that what she was about to say would deeply impact the way her daughter viewed the world. "Sweetheart, sometimes people don't treat others fairly, not because they've done something wrong, but because of prejudice and ignorance," she said, her voice full of emotion. "What we went through was unjust, but it wasn't our fault. Do you understand?" Sophie nodded slightly, but her eyes still held questions. "Then if it was their fault, why didn't anyone stop them, Mom? Why didn't anyone stop them?" Sophie's question struck a chord in Emma. She realized that her daughter was no longer looking at the world through a naive lens. This experience had made Sophie realize that sometimes injustice exists, even when there's no good reason. Emma hugged her daughter, whispering, "That's why we have to stand up, so that no one else has to go through what we just did." Beside her, Lily, the second daughter, seemed to sense something was wrong too. With her brave personality, she looked at her mother with a determined gaze. "You're right, Mom. I think it's unfair. They shouldn't have treated us that way. We're legal passengers. Why were we suspected just because we looked different from them?" Lily's blunt words made Emma feel proud, but also sad. She didn't want her children to experience such pain at such a young age, but she knew these lessons in injustice were necessary for them to grow. Mike, standing nearby, listening to his children's words, felt a heavy weight in his heart. He placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, then turned to Sophie, looking deeply into each of his daughter's eyes. "Girls, sometimes we'll meet people who don't understand and don't treat us fairly, but what's important is that you never let those people decide your worth," he said firmly. "Your mom and I will always be here to protect you, but we also want you to know that you have the right to speak up when you're treated unfairly." Chloe, the third daughter, stood close, listening to her parents and older sisters, her eyes brimming with tears. Chloe was sensitive and easily hurt, and this experience had frightened her. She looked at her father, her voice trembling. "Daddy, I'm scared. I don't understand why they were angry with us. Why did it have to be our family?" Mike pulled Chloe close, gently stroking her hair, trying to reassure her. "You don't have to be scared, Chloe. You did nothing wrong. We don't deserve to be treated this way, and you have the right to be respected." He spoke softly, but in his heart, he knew that these reassurances couldn't erase the pain Chloe had endured. This was not just an incident, but a bitter experience that would leave a mark on his daughter. Meanwhile, Ava, the youngest daughter, only 8 years old, still clung tightly to Emma's hand. She said nothing, but her big round eyes filled with tears. Emma knelt down, pulled Ava close, and held her tightly. "Sweetheart, it's over now. Mommy and Daddy will always protect you," she whispered, her voice comforting but unable to hide the pain. Emma knew that even though Ava was young, she wouldn't forget what had happened. Their 4 daughters gathered close to their parents, silent but their eyes filled with trust. Emma knew that what had happened wasn't just a challenge for her and Mike, but a significant lesson for her children, a lesson that any parent would want to spare their children from, but also knew couldn't be avoided forever. She held their hands, looking at each small face, determined that her family would get through this, and her daughters would understand the value of unity and resilience. As the family sat down in the waiting area to wait for their flight, Emma and Mike exchanged a glance, a look full of empathy and determination. They knew that this struggle was not just about protecting their family, but also about showing their children that they deserved respect and had the right to demand fairness. Mike gently placed his hand on Emma's shoulder, whispering in her ear, "We're not going to let this be forgotten. Right, hon?" Emma nodded, her gaze distant. But in her heart, she understood that their family's fight was far from over, and she was ready to fight to the end. As the Johnson family boarded the plane, surrounded by their 4 daughters, Emma felt that her family was not just a haven of love, but also a source of strength to fight for what was right. Her heart swelled with determination. They couldn't let this story fade into obscurity or allow the injustice they had suffered to become a silent scar. They had to speak up, not only for themselves, but for other families who might face the same unfair treatment. Once seated, Emma took out her phone and found the number of Ella, a close colleague at her law office. The other end picked up, and Emma didn't hesitate to begin describing the situation. Every detail. "Ella, I need your help," she said, her voice steely and determined. "My family was detained at the airport without any reasonable cause, treated with disrespect and blatant unfairness. I want to sue the airport and the staff involved in this incident." Ella listened quietly and then responded with absolute support. "I understand, Emma. Don't worry. I'll support you. We'll bring the truth to light." Ella quickly took notes on the details, also requesting Emma to send all the videos and photos captured by nearby passengers as evidence for the lawsuit. Ella promised to contact media outlets to ensure the Johnson family's story reached a broader audience. Emma knew that only public pressure would force the airport to take real accountability. When Emma ended the call, one of the earlier security officers approached nervously, his face clearly showing concern. The officer seemed to realize that the Johnson family was not one to let this go easily. He bowed slightly, his voice trying to sound calm but filled with tension. "I'm very sorry for what happened, and we will conduct an internal investigation to determine the cause. If there is any wrongdoing, those responsible will be appropriately disciplined. I hope your family can overlook this incident." Emma looked at the officer, her eyes cold and resolute, showing no sign of concession. "Overlook it?" Emma said, her voice full of determination. "Do you understand that this isn't just an unpleasant experience for my family, but outright discrimination? If we don't speak up, who will ensure that other families won't face this?" The security officer hesitated. The surrounding passengers continued watching the conversation, some even recording with their phones. The outraged looks from the crowd only made the officer more uncomfortable. He bowed slightly, trying to force a smile as he continued. "We deeply regret this unfortunate situation. If your family has any further complaints, please feel free to contact airport management directly." Emma crossed her arms, her eyes expressing her fury. "Don't just apologize. What my family needs is real action, not empty promises. We will pursue this matter to ensure justice is served, and that discrimination has no place in public spaces like this." Mike placed his hand on Emma's shoulder, looking deeply into her eyes, as if sharing the emotional burden they were both carrying. "We'll fight to the end," he said softly, his voice filled with resolve. Then he turned to the security officer. "My family didn't deserve this treatment, and we'll do whatever it takes to make sure no other family has to go through this. This isn't just about us. It's a reminder to everyone that no one has the right to demean others because of prejudice." The security officer realized that his efforts to appease them were futile. He bowed and retreated, his expression showing a mix of disappointment and worry. He knew that this incident would not be easily hidden, and that the Johnson family would continue to push the story into the light. Some of the surrounding passengers, who had witnessed the entire incident, began to show the Johnson family nods of sympathy and whispered words of support. An older man approached, placing a hand on Mike's shoulder, saying, "I'm sorry for what your family went through. I'll share your story on social media so everyone knows about this injustice." Another middle-aged woman spoke loudly. "Keep fighting. We're all with you." Emma looked around at those nearby, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She nodded in acknowledgement, realizing that she was not alone in this fight. The encouragement from strangers strengthened her resolve even more. As it was time to board, the Johnson family moved toward the gate together. The 4 daughters stayed close to their parents, holding hands tightly, seeking comfort and strength. Sophie, the eldest, walked near her mother, her eyes shining with determination. "Mom, I want you and Dad to know that I'm proud of you both. What you did isn't just protecting us, it's standing up for fairness for many others." Emma smiled, gently embracing her daughter. "Sweetheart, your dad and I will always stand up for what's right, and I hope one day you'll do the same." Lily, nearby, heard her mother's words, her eyes lighting up. "I want to fight for fairness too," she said confidently. Chloe and Ava, the two younger daughters, though not fully understanding, looked at their parents with absolute trust. All four girls understood that the Johnson family was not just a loving home, but also a place where they were taught about courage and justice. As the plane took off, the Johnson family knew they were embarking on a new journey, one that would not be easy, but filled with determination. Mike sat beside Emma, holding her hand tightly, a silent promise that no matter the challenges, they would always stand together. They exchanged looks of understanding and encouragement, knowing they would never give up until justice was served. Throughout the flight, Emma closed her eyes, reflecting on all they had been through and what they would face ahead. But in her heart, worry had been replaced by a strong conviction that she would not back down. She would use every resource at her disposal to ensure that no one could deny the worth of her family and those who had endured similar injustice. They would fight to the end, not just to seek justice for themselves, but to create a world where no one is discriminated against for how they appear. The Johnson family's journey had become a symbol of resilience and the power of family. They all knew that many challenges lay ahead, but with unity and love, they would overcome any obstacle. Emma, Mike, and their four daughters were ready to fight for a fairer future, a future where everyone has the right to be treated with respect and equality. Through the story of the Johnson family, we are reminded that sometimes big changes start from seemingly small actions, like refusing to stay silent in the face of injustice, teaching our children about the value of courage, and standing unwaveringly against discrimination. They chose not to let this go, not only for themselves, but to help build a fairer and kinder society. The Johnson family's journey reminds us all, when faced with injustice, be resilient, stand together, and always believe in the power of change. Because only when we continue to speak out does the world have a chance to become better for ourselves and for future generations. If you found this story meaningful and want to help spread positive values, please subscribe to the channel to avoid missing the next inspiring story. With your participation, we can build a strong community where justice and compassion are celebrated. Thank you for being with us, and together we will create a better world.